Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is the Intel ARC A310. It's one of the cheapest new graphics cards you can buy. It's currently one of, if not the weakest card in the desktop ARC lineup, so my question today is, should you buy it? This is the Sparkle Elf version. Now Sparkle go way back. I think they used to be an Nvidia board partner from the early 2000s up until I want to say 2013. The last time I saw a Sparkle card was back when the GTX 700 series came out. That's all changed now, of course. This 75 watt card features 4GB of GDDR6 memory and requires no external power. There is also a 50 watt low profile version, which makes more sense for more compact systems. In the box we have the card and nothing else. Who needs a driver disc in 2024 anyway? Who even has a disk drive? We've got 3 display ports here and 1 HDMI. The only place I found this for sale in the UK is Amazon, where I paid £120. In the US I've seen A310s for $99, though not necessarily this model. As an ARC card, it's best used in a system with resizable bar support for optimal performance, so I've paired it with my i5-12400F as well as 32GB of 3200MHz DDR4. At the time of this video I'm using Windows 10 Pro build 19045. Let's get into some games. So I started off easy for the ARC A310, Fallout 4, 1080p with the medium preset TAA for an average of 83. I did actually start off with higher, but we actually saw dips below 60fps quite frequently, especially in this area here, Cambridge, which is quite intensive. 64fps was the 1% low and the 0.1% low was 28. I expected Fallout 4 to do well though, especially at lower settings, because it is quite an old game. Though that said, ARC cards can have a bit of trouble with older titles. Counter-Strike 2 is up next, 1080p with a high preset and AA off. I'd probably recommend playing with the low preset to maximise frame rates in a competitive game like this, but as a graphics card benchmark I thought we'd see how high I can sort of push things, and it had no trouble with the high preset. 110fps with a 1% low of 69, nice, and a 0.1% low of 30. Next up I tried The Witcher 3 Next Gen, 1080p with the lowest settings here. This one didn't do so well, especially at higher visual presets, so we were best off sticking to the lowest settings, albeit with FXAA. We could have enabled FSR as well to get that frame rate over 60, but I felt as though this was good enough. 58 on average, the 1% low was 48 and the 0.1% low was 23. The game certainly picks up outside of busier areas. This is why I felt that the lowest settings was fine without any extra help from upscaling, but it's entirely up to you, of course. Now, as you may imagine, Starfield is problematic for this 4GB entry-level card. 1080p with the lowest settings and native resolution produced just 18fps. Pretty unplayable if you ask me. Now, in order to try and improve things, I enabled XESS and set it to performance mode. This didn't help all that much. 22fps was the average, the 1% low was 18 and the 0.1% low was 16. So yeah, it made things a little more consistent, but I don't really think 22fps is playable. The only thing left to do then, aside from drop the native resolution, which didn't really help, was enable FSR 3 at 50% res scale with frame generation. FSR 3 on its own, frame gen off, didn't make any difference, so I enabled frame gen for 38fps. 29 was that 1% low and the 0.1% low was 27, so it certainly bumped things up a bit, but frame generation doesn't feel that great if you're not getting at least 60fps. Don't get me wrong, it definitely felt better than playing at 22fps like we were just now, but it's not going to feel as smooth as a normal 38fps, if you get what I mean. Apex Legends, highest settings here, all else lowest, TSAA set to on for 109fps, the 1% low was 63 and the 0.1% figure was 52. So for games like this, Apex Legends and CSGO, as we saw earlier, those esports online games, it's going to do pretty well, and if you're looking for a card just to play titles like that, it's going to be absolutely fine. I thought I'd push the textures to high here because this was fine according to the in-game graphics menu. A good set of figures in my opinion, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect from Apex. Baldur's Gate 3 is another game that will struggle at native resolution 1080p with the lowest settings here. While we saw 30 plus FPS, well 31, the 1 and 0.1% lows did suffer a little at 15 and 7 respectively. Now interestingly, enabling FSR 1.0 actually performed worse than FSR 2.2. FSR 2.2 also looks a lot better, and it allows us to set the preset to ultra performance. Doing so gave us 43 FPS on average, with a 1% low of 30 and a 0.1% low of 19. So yeah, it was a lot better, but there will still be moments of slowdown. Another older title, GTA 5, with the highest settings, the detail sliders set to 5 out of 10, soft shadows, anisotropic filtering set to X8, post FX set to normal, and FXAA enabled for an average of 96. I did notice a few occasional stutters. I think this is just an ARC card in combination with an older game. These things do happen sometimes. Let me say though that the ARC drivers have come a long way since I first got my hands on an ARC card. I remember the A750. I remember having to use DXVK in a lot of older games to actually get them running smoother. But here things have really improved, I feel, and this is another good example of a game that runs pretty well on this entry-level card. The same can actually be said for Red Dead Redemption 2. To be fair, it's a little bit harder to run, of course, being newer, and visually it's a lot better looking, but ultra textures, which I thought was a bit of a push, anisotropic filtering set to X4, everything else set to lowest, the geometry LOD maxed out, the grass LOD set to 2 out of 10 and TAA medium, gave us an average of 52. We could have enabled FSR, it would have boosted the frame rate a little bit, not above 60 though. But I felt that Red Dead feels absolutely fine to play between 50 and 60 FPS, to be fair. It's entirely up to you though. As you can see from the results, this was really consistent as well. Now Cyberpunk 2077 is best played at the lowest settings at native 1080p, average 47 FPS with a 1% low of 39 and a 0.1% low of 13. In order to hit or almost hit a 60 FPS average, we needed to enable XeSS, set it to quality mode, and this gave us 59, which I felt was a really nice improvement. This also improved the percentile lows as well, coming in at 48 and 46, so it improved the consistency too, and pretty much transformed the game. It was still playable at native 1080p in my opinion, but this made things a lot better without much of a visual sacrifice. Helldivers 2 at the lowest settings will run at 37 FPS with anti-aliasing on. Trouble is, this is a fast-paced shooter, so you're going to want a higher frame rate than this. This is why I switched once again to upscaling. I set the render scale mode to quality for an average of 60 this time around, and as you can see, our percentile lows were improved yet again without much of a sacrifice in terms of visual degradation. So this is definitely the way to play in my opinion. I finalised then with Fortnite at 1080p with a low preset, 100% 3D res and TAA. I was running in DX12 mode because it was a little bit smoother here for 83 frames per second. 39 was that 1% low and 18 was that 0.1% figure, so playable but the odd stutter here and there. Now aside from gaming, the A310, like other ARC cards, is great for video editing thanks to AV1 encoding support. It's a pleasure to use with DaVinci Resolve, for example. We have to focus on gaming though, because that is primarily what we're all about here on this channel, and as you've just seen, it can be a mixed bag. It is an entry-level card after all, and in some cases I think it did fairly well, but I'll have some comparisons to other lower end offerings soon to see how it stacks up in the grand scheme of things. These cards definitely do better with older games than they used to, that's for sure. I think the drivers have come such a long way, and that is essential, especially with lower end hardware too. Thanks for watching, let me know your thoughts down below, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.